pouring rain for like 20 minutes. And then when the thunder and lightning started striking in the air, I was like, okay, it's time to go home.
That's commitment. That's commitment. Well, best of luck on those letters. Hopefully you get a call.
I know. I really hope so. It's the energy you put out, you get back, right? So
100%.
We're running around in the rain. There you go.
Sorry guys, I don't know why my camera.
Oh, Corrie, you're we can't really hear you. You're robotic.
Yeah. You have earbud issues.
Okay, how about now?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Jeez. Hi guys.
I can't get my AirPods to connect properly to my computer. I don't know why. So
Sometimes
weird.
it works. Sometimes I sound robotic apparently, but 9 times out of 10, they're fine.
Now we're waiting for Mindy and Tyler, but
How's everyone doing?
Good,
I
how
know
are you?
we didn't have a team meeting this week, so I feel like I haven't seen you guys in a little while.
I know, right?
She's frozen.
Who's frozen? Oh, Natalie's frozen. Oh, no, she's not. Okay.
She's just very, very still.
Yeah. Let's dive in. So we are day one of Seller Mastery, where we're going to be diving into really, I mean, we'll get into qualifying sellers because I know, Corrie, that's a really important part, especially when we're taking the time to go on our listing consults. We do want to ensure that our sellers are well qualified, as well as the value for North Group agents and North Group as a whole, and how we can communicate that effectively during our consults. And then depending on time, we might get into the actual listing consults. If not, we'll kick off next week with our listing consults. But feel free to intervene at any time. I know that we're definitely open to this being interactive, and we all have so many great ideas. We've been doing this for so long. And, you know, things are always evolving. I'm sure, Corrie, when you first started doing things versus, you know, Nat or Matthew or Adam, like, we're probably all doing things so differently. So it's nice to hear you know, what successes you guys are having. So feel free to chime in, pipe in, ask any questions along the way. And Corrie, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, and Bianca, I'm host. I can share my screen eventually.
You are now.
I am now. Hey guys, thanks for joining. Who wants to get more listings?
I do.
That's all I want to get. I'll be really honest with you.
Me too.
Like, that's all I want. And I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong with working with buyers, and obviously we have to. And when I was a newer agent for quite some time, I remember my broker at the time saying, like, you work with more buyers than anyone in the brokerage, which I didn't care because I was, you know, it was my thing. I knew, you know, I was good at it. I had the flexibility at that time to be out more, and I knew I wasn't gonna have to negotiate my commission. And then as, you know, you get more experience, life changes. I have kids now. Just for me, listings are important just because I feel like I have more time, and I want to be in charge of things, and I want to have more control. So call me a control freak. Yep, there it is. So now buyers that I work with are either referred or past clients, or they have to be like really, really qualified. But saying that, I don't want anyone to think there's something wrong with working with buyers. You need to work with buyers, and the buyers eventually sell. Like, that's the whole thing. That's how I started getting listings, was the buyers eventually would sell when you stay in touch with them, and then just naturally. The thing about listings and why it's more of like seasoned agents that focus on them is because it's a different skill, right? It's a different skill than working with buyers. Although nowadays with the competition with buyers, you have to, it's not just like opening doors and like writing an offer. You have to have a strategy for like winning that offer, coaching your client, coming up with, you know, great rapport with the listing agent, etc. So don't get me wrong, working with buyers is definitely a skill as well, but there's a different kind of experience skill that comes in with time. with listing properties and dealing with the seller, dealing with expectations, dealing with disappointments when things don't go as planned or they don't sell an offer night. And then dealing with the realtors, dealing with multiple offers and all that stuff, like bringing it along the way. So what I'm going to do today, because we've broken this into 3 sessions versus trying to put it all into one, it's a lot of information. I'm going to focus mostly today on like qualifying and preparing for the listing consultation, which sounds extremely basic, but I think there's a lot of things here that we miss that could set us up for success later on. And then I may get into the actual consultation, but I really want to spend a chunk of time there, as well as diving into North Group value, as well as us as individual value, and how we incorporate those. Because I understand, just like most of you guys, we are the brand, right? And that's important to us, but we have a machine behind us that we are, you know, partnered with, that we should be utilizing with our listing consultations and in that presentation, right? Because when someone's going to list, they're probably their biggest investment. You better come with some value to win that listing, right? It is an honor to get a listing. And there's some really great listing agents out there, right? So, you know, I know we say this, the saying, people work with who they know, like, and trust. People work with people that they emotionally connect with, that they actually like, they have something in common, but shows extreme value and is on top of their, you know what, right? I know if I was a consumer and I was going to enlist in a realtor, I'd have to feel extremely confident that not only can they exceed or, you know, have my goals met in terms of the price I want, timeline, making it as seamless as possible, that they can actually handle it, because it's hard out there sometimes, right? So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to dive in. Guys, stop me at any time, put your hand up, ask questions. This is also interactive. And I'm not here to say I know everything about listing properties and the whole process. I've just gathered stuff over the years to build my confidence and just to kind of put it together. And that's what really you have to ooze in these consultations, even if you are scared, is confidence. There's many times I go in and I'm like, oh my gosh. But if you fully prepare ahead of time, you've asked the right questions, you can somehow get inside the seller's head on expectations, you will walk, and then you prepare for the actual consultation, you will walk in there with confidence. If you're just winging it, I'll just kind of, you know, go by, you know, whatever, you're going to lose. So let me share and let's dive in. Who's excited? Anybody? Okay, good.
Oh yeah, we're all muted, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I saw hands. So I'm doing the preview. Bianca, can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
And Bianca, I'm just going to do it from here with my arrow because I don't know where the present button is.
Do you have, if you go scroll up top, it'll say preview something, like your menu bar?
Yeah, I'm looking at it now.
Go to the next one over. Next one.
If not, I can just do it like with
Slideshow. There you go. Scroll to the bottom. The second left option.
Because usually it's a PowerPoint. All right, guys, now I'm a professional. If you're using this in your listing presentation, make sure you've gone through it so you're not like me and you don't know where the buttons are. Okay. Oops, we're skipping. Okay, seller mastery. So qualifying sellers is extremely important. And I think sometimes we fail in this area because we are scared to ask the questions because we're scared of what the answer is going to be, right? You know, you really want to dig in and ask as many questions as possible. And when you're setting, you know, when you're speaking with them, you're going to let them know, I'm going to ask you a series of questions, which is going to help me prepare for our appointment in person, which will allow me to come with the most accurate pricing, et cetera, and plan for your real estate goals. I think we get scared to ask certain questions and then we fall short. So, you know, when I'm looking at talking to a seller, I really focus on the W's. So when I say the W's, like when, where, and why, right? Like if we got to get very clear on what their timeline is, right? We got to know, is this someone that's more serious, that's going to be selling within the next 3 months, or is this going to be more of like a nurture for later on? Now, don't get me wrong. I have many conversations with people that are just curious about the market. Those are great because that's an introduction. And we have those conversations, but they're a little different than someone that's actually looking to go onto the market now. So we need to figure out timelines. When are you thinking of going onto the market? Like what kind of timeline, right? Because properties also need preparation time to get ready for sale. And I know a lot of times people underestimate the amount of time, especially if they've lived in a property a long time. We want to get clarity on why they're moving. Are they moving because it's a downsize, an upsize, an unfortunate separation, divorce, relocation? Like there's so many reasons people are looking to sell. But when we dig deep on that, we can see, is this something I can help as well with the buy? Or is it in an area that's outside of my area of expertise where I could refer them to an agent to help? Right? So always think about that. If it's going to be outside of your area, that you could put them in touch with one of our real estate, I just always say I can put you in touch with one of our partners in those areas. And then you're still getting some kind of payment for that referral. So the whens, the wheres, the whys are really, really important to make sure that you're talking to someone that's qualified. 1 second, guys. I just want to move you guys' picture so I can see my full screen. You also want to dive deep into the type of property. Is it a freehold condo townhouse? Is it a townhouse? Is it a semi? Is it linked? Like we got to ask those questions. And I let them know, tell me as much details about your property as possible. And then I'm taking notes. Make sure, guys, that you're taking notes, because the worst is to have to ask the same question later on. Does anybody have any questions about what I just spoke about?
Corey, one thing I also do is I take a bunch of photos with my phone just as I'm walking around, and then I later look at them, like even for Sarah in the group to do the write-up, or even for myself just to like, oh, was it this or was it that? And I just look back at the photo. So like tons of notes.
That.
I do that every time. I say to my clients, I'm taking photos right now. These are not for marketing purposes. And I use the embedded command or set expectations that we're going to bring in a professional photographer, because I may not have even signed the listing paperwork yet. We're going to bring in a professional photographer for marketing. This is just for my recollection purposes.
One thing, actually, I went to a listing presentation when I was taking photos, and I was telling him it was just to remind me later. The husband and the wife kind of turned to each other and they're like, oh, the last one didn't take any photos. Like, so they felt like I was going that extra, like, I don't want to forget anything. Like, I want to remember everything. So I did notice that they even noticed that you're doing that above and beyond.
So true, both of you guys. And actually, I lost a listing once, and it wasn't, I didn't do truly, really anything wrong. And it was a very, very, very close one. But this person has more presence than I do in my farm. And I really respect her business. But one of the things they said to me is she took a lot of notes, and I was taking notes too, but she took more. Right. So she seemed to have, what was the wording? Like a more knowledge on pricing, which wasn't true, but I was just like, they do, like you said, do notice when you're doing that kind of stuff is taking notes, asking thorough questions, like Amy said, taking pictures, etc., because we forget. I forget sometimes, how many bathrooms do they have? Was it a 3-piece, a 4-piece, right? So you want to take as much information down as possible and take pictures so you can look back and remember, and you're not having to ask the same thing twice. Some of the questions,
but when you were, sorry, when you were talking like prior to that, that was sort of, you're doing those qualifying things on a call, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, so the qualifying is typically on a phone, or if I can get them on a Zoom consultation, and that's just since COVID, in all honesty. I was not doing that prior, but now I feel like it's an emotional connect. Like Zoom is amazing, right? Sometimes it's just on the phone, Matthew, but sometimes it is like, if I can get them on a Zoom, I feel if I can get them on the Zoom, there's just more of a connection, but whatever I can get, I'll do. But yes, it's just ask those initial questions. Some of the other things I'll ask guys, and I just have a sheet that like I put this together like years ago, but it helps. And now it's just like embedded in my head. But when are you looking to be moved by into your new property? That's something I'll ask to get an idea on the timeline. You want to ask, even though you've likely looked up the property in Geo, I don't usually ask how long have you owned your house, because if I'm having the qualifying call, I've already looked that up. Right. So I can see you've owned your house since, 1998. Then I know they've been there for quite some time. So they're likely going to need more help with getting the house ready, which means they're probably in a little bit of overwhelm. Where do I start? If it's someone that's just owned the home like 4 years, then it's, it's going to be a little bit different, right? Like, why are they moving, etc. What is the reason for your move? If you did sell, some people are just curious and you're having a conversation. If you did sell, do you have an idea of where you'd be moving to? People that have lived in their house a really long time and they know pricing's up and they know they're sitting on a lot of equity and they know they need to downsize because the kids are gone. They have, like, a lot of them don't know where they're going. It's the number one thing. If they can get clarity on where they'd be going, then the other part starts becoming easier. So asking that questions to get an idea, so you can offer some advice, or where they're challenged right now. I already talked about if you need a referral to an agent in that area, what's the style of your house? Is it semi-detached, etc.? Now, again, if I've looked it up in Geo, I already know those things as well. One of the things I'll also do before I have a call with them, this is provided I have a call set up. I would have looked up the house to know if it, I would have looked up on MLS to see if I could find the original listing. Right? That is really, really helpful. Now, if they've been there a really, really long time, like over 30 years, then you're not likely going to find it. But if they've been there within 20, you'll likely find the old listing, provided that it was listed prior on MLS. So I'd be definitely looking at those two things before your scheduled call. Look up on Geo to see, whose names are on title, right? Look up to see how long they've owned the property, as well as the type of property. Look on MLS to see if you can find the actual listing, so you know what it is: a bungalow, 2-bedroom. And I'll let them know I've taken a look at your original listing when you bought in 1995, and I see that 2-bedroom bungalow, unfinished basement. Since that time, have you done any updates, renovations, or any improvements that likely would increase value? Then let them talk, and then start taking notes, right? You can also get their lot size, obviously, on Geo, so you have that information as well. So when you're talking to them, you can say, I see you have a 50 by 150 lot. I see you have in your head, because those things impact value. Lot size in my area is huge, right? A 50 versus a 60. I know the type of buyer that's going to want to buy that property. So you're just trying to stay ahead of them, that you've done your homework and you're prepared for the call. What are your home's best features? And one thing I always ask, and I think people are really scared to ask it, is, do you have an idea of what you think your house is worth? Or you must have an idea of what you think your house is valued at. 9 or 8.5, 9 times out of 10, they will tell you a value. I do this every single time. I dislike going into listing presentations where I haven't gotten an answer from the seller. Do I get one every single time? No. Do I get one most of the time where they tell me? Yeah. And I know right then, first of all, a ballpark of what they're thinking. And then when I do my homework, I can analyze, is that realistic, or are they out to lunch, essentially? Oh gosh.
So, sorry, can I, sorry, did somebody else say something? Can I ask you a question? So when they say to you, oh, well, that's your job, you tell me what you think it's worth, how do you usually handle that? Because I do get that sometimes.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm going to do. But I'm always curious to hear what people think, because typically, people that own their home, know an idea of what value's like. Well, my neighbor sold for 800, but we have a bigger lot and a finished basement. That they just answered right there, that they know what they think it's worth over 800. Right? But usually I'll say something like that, Amy. I'll say absolutely, and I'm going to prepare that for you. I'm always curious to see what people think, because, you know, usually you have a, you know, your pulse on what's happening in your neighborhood.
Okay.
Have there been any recent sales in your area that you're aware of? You know, I'll ask those kind of questions. Anything I can do, and I might have to ask like a few different kind of ways to get an answer. And then if I can't, before I present, and I'll go through this eventually in the list, the actual listing presentation in person, before I even talk about pricing, which is the last thing I talk about, I'll ask them one more time. You know, just to make sure, because I feel very uneasy personally when I don't have an idea of what they think, especially if it's an area where pricing is like, you know, my farm area, it's like, you know, there's like, well, now, because I'm just so on top of it, I know like bungalows are going for this, but the housing varies so drastically in terms of pricing, right? And sometimes they actually have absolutely no idea, right? Or they say a value that you know is really, really low, and you know you're going to surpass their expectations when you present eventually the pricing analysis to them. Another thing we want to make sure is if there's two people on title and you are making an appointment from here, because the goal here is to get all the information so then you can put together, you can work on your actual consultation that you can eventually get in person for that, in person with both sellers and both decision makers.
Corey, sorry, just wanted to add something. One thing I've noticed is like sellers now are super educated. They know every single house that's been up for sale, every single house that's sold. They know like if it's been terminated, like all this information's out there. So it's like they'll ask you about every single property. It doesn't even matter how old they are, if they're like young buyers or sellers or older like sellers. They know everything that's going on.
They absolutely do, right? They know everything. They do and they don't. Like they do have access to, like, come on now, everybody has access to pricing, right? And another, but you know, you are the professional in terms of like boots on the ground, what's actually happening, market conditions, shifts you're experiencing in the market. They don't have access to that stuff. So keep in mind, you're definitely the professional in that regard. In terms of that's just them just knowing random numbers, they don't understand, you know, is the strategy still to list low and sell high? Or is it now listing at market value and doing a 24-hour irrevocable? You as an agent need to be on top of that to know what the competition is doing, what's been going on in the last few weeks, because that has stopped in some areas, right? And you don't want to be the agent doing an old strategy. So they know stuff, but they don't know stuff, right?
And they tend to overvalue their updates, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Like I had someone that my client was interested in a specific property. And he grew up in it or something like that. And so I sent a letter and I actually got a response, and I was aware of what like the recent sales were. They were like around 8 something. And the person actually called me and they're like, you know, well, we'll sell for $1 million, which is totally overvalued, right? But they got a letter from me. So they're like, oh, this person must really want it. And it didn't go anywhere. But I said to them, listen, at the end of the day, we're very aware of what value is and what pricing is. And when someone's taking a mortgage out on a property, right, every single time the bank's doing an appraisal on it. There's no getting away what actual market value is, because if the bank doesn't appraise it at what the buyer paid for it, they're not funding that full amount. So who's coming up with that? That's how I get people back to reality. You can talk to me all day long about you think your property is worth 1.4 when I know the last 5 sales have been 1.3. But I'll come at them in a way and just say, at the end of the day, there's no getting around what value truly is. If the market takes it somewhere else, and that is a bonus, right? But on average, this is what they're selling for. Have some been less? Have some been more? Absolutely. Right? But there's certain things that the market just does at times, depending on what the conditions are for that week.
That's great.
Yeah, because you know what? You can tell me whatever your property is worth. I'm not the one. As agents, we have to take responsibility and guilt off creating market value. We don't create market conditions. We're not like mysterious, like, you know, magic spell and making the pricing go up. We interpret market conditions and what's happening, and we educate our clients. We're facilitating that, right? People get really mad at realtors because they think we're creating all this craziness. Well, we didn't create low inventory and high demand, right? And I'll tell people that, like, I dislike this market just as much as you, right? I'm working with my buyers longer. I'm an emotional therapist. I need a therapist. You know what I mean? Like, it's not fun for anybody, right? And then you have sellers that are being unrealistic. We're just navigating what is, right? But we're very, and I'll tell people, like, I'm very experienced in multiple offers in dealing with that, right? I'm going to surpass your expectations. I do, like, I'm dealing with this with every single client. So I let them know that I got this, right? No matter what the conditions are. So things to be aware of, I guess, you know, we're going to talk about that now when you're closing for an appointment, is you can go there if you're comfortable saying, you know, are you talking to other realtors, right? That's something you can ask. Do I always ask it? I don't. But it's definitely something they'll usually tell you. And most people are interviewing 1 to a max of 3 people. They're not interviewing a whole bunch. They really aren't. It's unusual when you find someone that is doing so. But if I get the sense that they're talking to other people and, oh, well, I've talked to other people, you know, so I have, you know, an idea of this, you know, they're talking to other realtors, right? I always try to go in the last person if I can. I ask them, you know, allow me to be the last agent to come sit with you and meet with you. It's just my preference, because I feel like, you know, if they're interviewing several agents, they're going to go through all before they make a decision, right? So I'd like to be there last so I can do everything in my power to secure that deal, like that listing right there at the end. I think that's the mindset of why people like to go in last, although others have preference of going in first. So I don't know what's right, but that's just what I would do. In terms of hiring another agent before your appointment, I guess, you know, there's always a chance that they may list with someone prior to your appointment if you are going in last. I'll let people know that, you know, before you do anything, speak to me. Allow me an opportunity to sit with you. At the end of the day, you make the decision on who you're going to work with and who you feel can offer you the best services and that you trust and you like and that has value. I'm very confident in what we do. And I'd love an opportunity to sit with you and show you how we're making a difference, how we sold over this many homes last year, how we won, you know, most innovative team in North America, like what we're doing that's different. You owe it to yourself. It's likely your biggest investment. I'll say stuff like that when needed, just to let them know that at least give me a chance. You make a decision from there, but allow me an opportunity to at least speak with you.
So, Corrie,
yeah,
how would you handle a situation where, let's just say you are last of the interviews and you call that lead 24 hours before and they've informed you, you know what, we've decided to go with another agent. Knowing that your interview is supposed to be the next day or even maybe that day, how would you go about that conversation and handling that objection?
I'm sorry I'm sorry I didn't get an opportunity to meet with you and show you what we're doing. Have you signed with that agent? I would first find out if they've signed with that agent, because if they haven't, I'm going to push for that appointment again. This happened to me once. I got a call from someone and she had already interviewed like ridiculous amount of agents, like 10. And then I'm like, okay, what's going on? Like, how come you're talking to so many agents? Just couldn't find a fit. So we booked an appointment for like 2 days out. She calls me that afternoon and says, you know what, I'm just so like exhausted from this process. I'm going to go with the last agent. And I said, wait a second. I go, there's a reason you called me, right? If you need me to come in sooner, I can be there this afternoon. You owe it to yourself to speak with me. And I feel very confident that I'm going to, you know, surpass your expectations and your real estate goals. Went in that afternoon, secured the deal. And if I didn't go in another round, or I didn't push a little bit, or I just said, okay, then I wouldn't have had that opportunity. You have to be somewhat aggressive in a non-aggressive way, right? There's a for sale by owner by my house, and I swear to God, I'm going to get that listing. I am doing everything, and now it's just like a challenge. It's like I can see the house from my house. I've been by. When I dropped off, she called, like she knew my first name, so she knows. But it's like, if I'm doing all this to get your listing, what do you think I'm going to do when I negotiate for you? Right? If she's just, you know, if they're to say like, wow, you have called a lot of your, you know, yes, that's why, you know, I'm one of the top 1% in Toronto. You know what I mean? Yes, that's why I have the results I have, because I do push harder, and it's how I negotiate. It's how I surpass my clients' expectations. It's what, you know, so I know my list to sale ratio is this. So you can spin it. Oh, looks like someone's in the waiting room. I think someone got booted out. So you can spin it in a way that you're being you're not being aggressive, you're being like you're what's needed. People are also really, really busy nowadays that it takes several attempts for them, you know, when you're trying to initially get that consultation and that actual conversation, it can sometimes take weeks or months, guys. Like there's some people, if you've given me any sense of something real estate, oh, I'm on you, right? And, you know, call, text, I'll do it periodically, right? But sometimes it can take quite some time. It's just, you know, people are busy and it's repetition, right? Like you have really, really tried to get in touch with me. I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak with me, right? But most agents drop off. They tried once, maybe they tried again, then they forgot, that's gone, right? The successful agents and the ones that are, you know, getting the inventory, it's, you know, they're trying, they're on top of like who those leads are, right? Who are the hot ones, who are the warm ones? You have to be really aware and have your database organized so you know like which ones are on your radar. So we talked about that. So preparing for the listing consultation, this is huge. A lot of agents, I think, can just, you know, I know everything, I'm just going to wing it. So many people I hear don't have listing presentations or whatnot. Don't get me wrong, I don't do the same thing for every listing presentation. It depends on the relationship and it depends how the conversation's going. If I'm going to sit there and do a PowerPoint, or if I know that's not their personality and we're more connected, like in a warmer way, then it's going to be a little bit less of that and more talking. So you have to really be aware of their personality and sense. It's like this like intuitive feeling of like how PowerPointy you get, right? I'm not a big PowerPoint person in my listing presentations, I'll be honest with you, but I do use the seller guide every single time. And I usually pull it out and talk about it. Or if I'm doing a Zoom, I'll bring up the consultation on the computer. So it's relatively the same thing, but you have to really read your people. But preparation is everything. Fail to prep, then you know you're likely going to fail in the actual consultation with the person you're representing, potentially their biggest investment. You better be prepared. You better take the time, and not an hour before you're going over to the property. Schedule it like an appointment a few days prior, so you can actually feel really confident that you walked in that door. You know, you've already gotten inside of their head in terms of like the reason they're moving, right? And why they're moving and what potentially they're thinking about on pricing. You already have that. You've gone through and you've looked at comparable sales. Maybe in your conversation, they've mentioned a sale that's comparable. That's the best. And you've gone through it, right? They'll give you that information most times. So yes, you want to send them a calendar invitation because people forget things. Also, you want to, what I'll do as well is I'll schedule an email to go out either the night before or the morning of, depending the time of the actual in-person consultation where I'm meeting them. Because sometimes, you know, I want to make sure that I've reminded them the day before or early the day of that meeting, because again, people really, they can forget things. So doing that, your chances of actually having that appointment are a lot higher.
Corey, one thing I also do is the night before I send the available listings in their area. So if there's anything that's available, just for them to take a look at before our meeting, if they have any questions or so forth, it's not like I spring it up on them at the actual consultation.
That's a good idea. I don't do that, but that's not a bad idea if that helps for you and gets the conversation going. One thing I forgot to mention after my initial my initial questionnaire conversation with them, I'll recap what we've spoken about and email them before the end of that day. And then I'll send them the calendar invite. Like I'll do that as soon as possible, just to kind of like recap, looking forward to meeting with you and Bob and blah, blah, blah. And there's a secondary, you know, calendar invite coming as well. So just always keeping like the communication going. You never want to drop it. You want to just keep it flowing.
Corrie, you mentioned, changing your presentation slightly depending on the client and that sort of thing. One question that I like to ask during the pre-qual call to the seller is, what are you looking for in your realtor that you're going to choose to sell your house? And you'd think you wouldn't get an answer to that, similar to like, what do you think your house is worth? But most people will just tell you straight up, like, what's important to them. And if you can sort of take that and sort of adapt your presentation a little bit, not to, tell them you're something you're not, but just to sort of focus on the things that they've already said are important to them, they typically will respond positively to that.
Absolutely. And it's actually something I ask as well. And I forgot to tell you guys that. So thank you for the reminder, Tyler. Absolutely asking, lastly, like, can I ask what you're looking for in a realtor, or what's important to you in the realtor and team that you choose to represent you with your real estate goals? And then let them speak.
Another way to get that information is, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, is to ask them what their past experience with real estate agents have been, and have they been positive or negative, or maybe not ask about negative, but they always offer the negative, and then you can obviously adjust your style.
Absolutely. People are scared of realtors, right? Like, there's somebody right now I'm talking to, and he only wants to communicate via email, and I have his phone number because he's had a horrible experience in the past, but I'm going to win him over. Right. And I said, you know what, I respect that. And that's totally fine. And what I did is, when I had the consultation, his parents are considering selling their condo next year. And I put together the report and everything. I also sent him like my Google reviews, like our link, or like our North Group, like reviews on our website, or accolades, or our bragging rights. Sometimes I'll send that kind of stuff just to say, here's a little bit about our team and who we are. When I recap that consultation email, and I let them know, it was great speaking to you. I'm looking forward to meeting with you next week, Tuesday at 5 p.m. I'm sending a calendar invite as well. Here is some information on our seller experience and who we are and how we market and list our property. So I'll send them a link to our seller experience guide. Like, how we have the book online. I will send that as well, because it's kind of like your pre-list before you're actually in person with them. I would say 50% of them actually look at it before the actual meet in person. It's not unusual for people not to, but I send it. But yes, if you can find out what they're looking for in a realtor, I'm looking for someone that has great marketing. I'm looking for someone that I can trust. Where to focus your efforts and what they need to see shine out of you as well. Like, asking, what is your past experience with realtors? Right. I think people have less experiences than we think, because typically, like, families that I'm talking to, some of them bought pre-construction and they're selling for the first time. Like, I'm actually, my listing that's coming up tomorrow, one of them, they've lived in their house 17 years. Like, they can't remember half of what, I don't think they've actually sold a property before. Right. And I just, you assume, well, no, this has to be done. Oh, didn't know that. Right. But asking that is great, because sometimes people have had a bad experience, and we're right up there, guys. Let's face it, with car salespeople, in terms of how people look at realtors. We have one of the biggest real estate boards in North America, right? And we have like majority of those agents not actually selling real estate at a high enough level to really have an income from it. Like, that's just what it is. You have 20% doing 80% of the deals on real estate. But the public, some of the public, thinks we're all equal and we all do the same thing. It is your job, right, to show that you're different, that you have extreme value. And that can be perceived in a phone call with people like that. A lot of times I'll get like, okay, your stuff, you can win their trust over in just how your language and how you communicate, and that confidence that they feel like, yes, this is somebody I should consider. So you have to work on that confidence. So preparing a CMA of the subject property is huge, because this is what, when we sit with them in person, now I don't provide any pricing ahead of time, right? Unless I have no choice and they've cornered me and I have to give them like, okay, you're probably going to land here, but 9 times out of 10, that's not happening. We've talked about expectations. We've talked about the when, the where, the why. I have clarity on their situation. I know what I'm walking into. Is this someone that's likely going to list before the end of the year? Or is this someone that's just feeling out things, or it's going to be more of the spring of next year, right? And my conversations with them will be a little different in terms of talking about market conditions. Guys, when's the best time to sell? Now. That's always the answer. Now. That is what it is. I'm not telling people next spring. It's always now for me, right? Because there's always benefits. There's always benefits. Right now, we're talking about, the fall market and what's happening with, with sellers that have been on the fence. So now we have all this inventory that's going to be coming. It's a good time to get on the market as soon as possible. Buyers, it's a great time to pick back up because now there's a lot more inventory out there. So those are the conversations. You're going to have those and change those depending on the time of year. But the CMA is huge, and this takes time. This takes time. So you'll want to prepare a CMA of the subject property that you can bring in. Now you can either do it with, we've talked about Top CMA before. I've actually done a Loom video about it as well. It's not something that you have to have, but it's a nice tool virtually, I find. I don't like to print Top CMA because it's just so many pages. It's something I typically use on my computer, on my laptop when I'm there. I'm not personally always leaving a CMA, but I will recap the listing presentation if I haven't gotten it signed during that time afterwards. And I will include a link to the Top CMA, and that is it. Right? Plus the folder I've left at their house. I always leave a folder. If it's someone that's maybe elderly, I will just do the regular CMA that's just basic, and and that is a great tool as well. Like there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, but they don't need all the other jazz, right? And they're, sometimes you have to have the paper and kind of go through them. So you have to know your demographic of who you're dealing with and what the best one is. But basically you're going to get every detail possible about the subject property, right? And then you're going to look at what's been happening around this property in the area. I typically go back 6 months. Right now, I'll go back like January 1st and I'll kind of see what I can find, because the market has drastically changed since a year ago, or even, since a year ago, I was going to say, or even since last fall, which is now. It has changed so much in terms of price appreciation. Some of those sales are irrelevant in terms of using them in your CMA, right? So you got to really look. If you're doing a CMA in a condo, those are so easy, right? Because if it is unit 206, then you're going to look for the other 06 units initially. Guys, I'm sorry. Every time my phone rings, it's changing my screen. So with condos, you're looking to see if you can find when the last identical sale was. And then you got to make sure that even if it was the same unit number on a different floor, sometimes they can change the floor plan. So you got to make sure that through your initial consultation, you got all those details about the property. So, it's a 1+ den, 2 bathrooms, etc. So when you're looking at the comps, you're looking at the right unit. If there's not enough condo comps for that unit, then I'll just look for the last 1+ dens, any unit with that many bathrooms, of 1 or 2, and then I'll kind of look at where they're landing, right? And then from there, I will look at like what the averages are, right? When you're doing the CMA, it does it for you, right? When you're looking at the actual prices, you can do averages. So what's the average list to sale ratio? If it's 108%, we know that they've been selling over asking. But one thing that we need to really, really be aware of right now, guys, is we know over the last, I'm going to talk about what I'm experiencing in the area I focus on is before May, January to May, everything was holding back offers. So of course, everything was over 100% list to sale ratio. It was skewing the stats. But since May, and then what happened in May, properties started not to get offer on offers night. That started to happen just overnight. And I got stuck on that with a listing that I'm now relisting. So then it's like, we're back to, things are selling, we're listing now at market value and leaving like a 5% buffer for negotiations. So when you're presenting sales from January, you just got to make sure that you explain that with them, that the sale, you're seeing the list to sale ratio be this, because earlier this year, the strategy was to list lower to sell higher. Right now, the strategy is to list at market value, and you're going to sell. Doesn't mean pricing's gone down. Means the strategy has changed. And as a listing agent, the worst thing you can be doing is going with a strategy, because every time I talk to someone, are we going to do offer night? No, we're not going to do offer night, because they've heard it in the media and they've heard it from their friend down the street, right? As their professional, you have to be leading this right? So you're steering them in the right direction, and you're not just saying yes, 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 and listing it low, and then you get no offers on offer night. And guess who they're going to point the finger at? You, right? So you got to let them know that this is what's happening. I know you were hearing this, and then go through it with them. When you're sitting there with them in the consultation, you can actually, bring the listings with you, whether they're printed or on your computer, have them share. Sometimes you have to have them like involved in coming to an agreement of what pricing is, depending on the client. Especially if they've told you a value that you believe and is overvalued, that you're going to have your work cut out for you in the consultation to have a reality check on pricing. And that involves, you're not creating this, you're going through what is. This is what agents are going to use when they go to prepare an offer on your property. This is what banks are going to use when they fund a mortgage on a property. They're going to use the same stuff. So let's review that together. And then you can go through it with them.
Or you made a great point there about sort of being the professional, telling them sort of how this should go. And I want to, strengthen that with sort of anecdotally. I've had situations where, I don't know if it was because I wasn't feeling totally confident in sort of getting the listing, but I went in and sort of felt myself sort of being a bit flexible on things, giving people options and saying, it's whatever you want kind of, attitude. And that backfired on me. I think it's really important that we, put a strong foot forward and show them why we're the professional and say, this is what I think, and don't waver on that, because that's what people are looking for. They're looking for guidance. If they knew how to do it themselves, they would do it themselves. I think we have to be firm about the way that we think is right to get the place sold, and let the chips fall where they may.
Absolutely. Everything you just said, I agree with you. And I've done the same thing, and I've learned the hard way. And the worst, guys, is just to list it just to get the listing. And then it's overvalued. What's your reputation like in the industry and the agents that focus on that area? It's, it's just not good, right? So it's like, be the professional, steer them in the right direction. Do some sellers think they know everything? Absolutely. Do they think they can maybe do it on their own? For sure. We know that, right? That's why there's discount brokerages and there's for sale by owner signs up, because they are not seen. Those people aren't seeing a value in realtors, right? So it's for you to show value, for you to talk about, I understand you're trying to sell your property on your own. And I'm curious why. What is your experience with past realtors? We know, I've been in the business a long time to know, although you may think you're saving money, you're probably leaving money on the table, because the stats show that they're typically selling less than market value, right? So let's have, so let me try to help you. Let me offer you some advice. Those types of people, I'm going on to a different place here with for sale by owners and discount brokerages, right? But it's having those conversations to show your value. We're not a discount team. We're not a discount brokerage, right? You have to see value in yourself, that you feel confident in your commission. Do I always get 5%? Not always. Do I get it majority of the time? Yeah. Right. So it's being able to let them know, and if it comes up about commissions prior, like you're not in person, I do not like talking about that stuff before I've met them, because if you get someone, and it happens, guys, what's your commission? What's your rate? It happens all the time. The type of person that you're dealing with. You can say something like, we have different options depending on what your property needs. And once I see your property in person, I'll be able to, I'll be able to get some insight to what you need and what you don't need, and go through the options, right? It can vary from anywhere from 3.5% to 5%. You could say like something like that, right? Because I offer a collateral agreement of 3.5. That means if I'm representing both, and that's what the total commission is, right? Otherwise, it's 2.5 on the list side. I also break up my commission into two, like what's your commission? 2.5%. That's what I'm getting paid on the list side. I get paid full 5%. That's how I start that conversation.
Corrie, I started doing that after you mentioned that in your last seller's training, that you explained that it's 2.5 is to the buyer, and I don't discount that. And then it's not actually 5. I started doing that after you mentioned it.
Kind of helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. They immediately, like, it clicks in, like they don't, oh, you're making so much money. It's more like, oh, I get it. And I say, I never discount them. I don't want to discount their work. You know, they're bringing in their clients. You don't want to deter that. I stick to that. I said a lot of other agents, what they do is they'll divide the discount between the two agents and it affects your property. And immediately they'll say, okay, like, all right, that makes sense. So
Absolutely. We assume people understand that it's 2.5 and 2.5. They absolutely do not. They think we are like, it's all, and you break it down like that and you say, it's 2.5% typically. And I let them know. I have a sheet, and I think I've shared it with some of you, where I list all our services. I sat one day and I'm like, I wrote it all down. And then it was for like an ad I was doing. And then I ended up like, this is something I should have in my presentations. And it talks about, everything that I include. Is it professional photography, cleaning, home inspection, drone video? I mean, all that depends on the type of property, but I have a list of all the services that are included in my fees, and I let them know this is everything that's included, right? So if there's any discount on commissions, or we're talking about that, it's going to come off the list side, not the buy side, because we don't want any agents not to show your property because it's not what the average or what, the going is for the cooperating agent, right? So if we're going to be talking on this, I don't want to discount any of these services. But if it depends on the situation. If there is a discount, if they're buying with me, if the house doesn't need staging, like there's certain things that it's a per whatever, but I do my best to keep as much in my pocket as possible. This is a profession.
Corrie, are you going to go over commission discussions more thoroughly later, or do you want us to ask questions now since we're on the topic?
I usually don't get into them until I'm at the actual listing consultation, but I'm happy to talk about that if you have questions about it right now.
Yeah, I'm just curious, so when you provide them a list, are you paying for staging? Are you paying for like all of those things that you just listed? That's what you're paying for. And that's when you kind of get into the conversation of, okay, if you don't want to do this, like we have package. I remember like Cody in one of our meetings saying like, oh, we have package A, we have package B, we have package C, and that kind of, took him to a roundabout way of like, this is where I am the most uncomfortable in all of my conversations, because I just hate talking about this. That's why I'd like to do that.
No, very good question, Natalie. And it's an uncomfortable conversation, right? That's why listing properties and being able to handle that conversation is different with working with buyers. And 9 times out of 10, they're not asking for what commission is unless they're trying to get a kickback, which is an absolute no, right? That's a whole different thing. But, I used to honestly have something that was like, there's this one and there's this one and there's this one, right? I don't have that anymore, but what I do let them know loosely is yes, there's options depending on what your house needs. Let's get into more details when we meet in person, but it can range anywhere from here to here, right?
Right.
You don't need to know that 3.5 is only going to happen if it's a collateral agreement and I double end it. I will get into those details in person, because if I get into too much details on the phone before I'm in person, there is a chance I'm going to say something that's not going to get me the appointment. So we have to be very careful with what we say ahead of time in terms of commission, but you have to give the feeling as though there could be some flexibility. Right. Not everybody asks. Sometimes I do a listing presentation and it hasn't even come up. Right? Dead, right? Oh yeah. Do you have any questions? Oh yeah. What are your fees?
Would you guys find it valuable if we proposed like a 3-tier package option and like a North Group branded document that if you wanted to use it in your listing presentation, you could, just so you have like a framework? Because there's some adjustments that we're making to our seller marketing for going into 2022, and we're really devoting a lot of time to that this fall. So if you think that that would be something valuable, we can certainly incorporate that. It doesn't have to be part of our seller guide, because I feel like this is too much of a transient piece or a piece that could be changed as needed, but it could be an insert into our presentation packages or something like that, if that would be helpful.
Even if we don't use, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Even if we didn't use it to show clients, it's good to have those levels in your own head. Like I created one for myself just to give myself, some understanding around the value in each, level. I think it's definitely worthwhile, Amy.
Absolutely. I think it's great. I mean, then you can kind of pull it out of your back pocket should you need it. Should you have a client that's talking about commissions ahead of time, you have that and you only pull it out if needed. It's kind of like in your back pocket that you should bring it out.
Okay.
The biggest expense, let's be real, is staging. That is the biggest for me anyways on selling a property. If there's no staging needed, that like, then I can be maybe a little more flexible if they ask. I'm not offering any discounts unless I'm asked.
Corey, quick
So they
question.
have to specifically ask you for a discount for you
Yeah,
to,
I'm not offering anybody a discount.
even
Why?
if they're your buyers?
Yeah, no.
That's-
Do
Corey,
lawyers offer discount if you've gone to them a few times? Is your doctor getting paid differently because you see them annually? Why do we discount ourselves as realtors? Like, think of this as a profession. Is my services changing because this is the second time I've sold a house? If they ask, of course I'm going to whatever, right? But if it's not, then I'm not going to, me personally.
I think that's a mental block that we have to get through.
I think just because we assume that we should, and once you start discounting, then you're known for that, right? Like, how do you come out of that hole eventually, right? Like, if you're always doing that and then you're just used to doing it, like, I'm here to make a lot of money, and I'm here, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not here to like discount listings. Do I have to sometimes? Absolutely, right? But I try not to. And also another thing is when we are doing the tier thing, or when you are coming down, come down in the littlest increments instead of like, oh, I'll do it for 4% versus 5%. Like, why are you coming down 1%? Right? Sometimes people just have to mentally know that you've given something. Right?
If we did a scripting session, I know that Bianca was mentioning we're doing some different scripting in the fall. This would be a good topic.
Corey,
Absolutely.
quick question about the CMA. So do you also leave the copy of CMA with the seller when you're leaving?
It depends. Sometimes I do. If I've done top CMA on the computer, I don't, just because I don't print it because it's just too much information. I'll email it after and I'll let them know I'm going to recap everything. I do leave, and I'm going to get into like what's in the folder, but I bring like our North Group folder. I bring a seller guide. If it's in my farm area, I'll bring like my just sold flyers. So I always like get extra. Because I want to bam, 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 I've done all this. I'll bring an example of a brochure. I always keep extra from all my listings. So if it's like more of a luxury listing, then I'm going to bring my luxury like printed brochure because I want to give them an example of how our marketing looks. I'm going to have my sheet of services that I will bring out as well. Really, that's it in the package. And then I'll either have a printed CMA if I've just done like the normal one on thing. Do I leave that? Yeah, sometimes I do. I'm not really worried about leaving that stuff, but there's a lot of times that I'm doing the top CMA now where I've just left like the marketing and the seller guide. I do leave the seller guide. I do. And then what I'll do afterwards, the appointment, which I'll get into that like with our next session, is I do recap everything in an email afterwards, which I'm happy to share with you guys. And I do send digital copies of everything that was in that folder. Because sometimes they want to share it with family, get an opinion, husband was out of town, although I always try to make sure everybody's there. But I'll send like a digital copy of the seller guide, a digital copy of the brochure where they can look into it. I'll send an example if it's someone where I'm going to do a custom rider. That's really more of a luxury listing that I used to do those. I'll send a link to that, which will show like, this is an example of the custom rider, and it will have, when they link on it, they'll see like the custom lifestyle video, floor plans, all the pictures. I'll send them a link to our website on our lifestyle videos. I'll send them usually that, as well as like our bragging rights. A very short form though. Do not send really, really huge. You had like bullet points. It was a pleasure to meet with you. I wanted to recap our conversation. And guys, I mean, I know the whole thing is to like get it signed, and trust me, I bring listing papers with every single appointment that I'm in person, but you don't always get them signed. Right? I'm not the type of agent that's going to camp out in your house until you sign. That's not my strategy. I let them know I'm not a pushy agent. Like, I move at my client's speed. I do really well, and I'm going to exceed your expectations, but I'm not like a pushy agent. But if I sense it's going there, and that's again just being intuitive, I'm going to let them know, here's what happens next. I'm getting too much into the actual consultation. I got to stop. So we already talked about preparing your market materials, because you want to go in there, you want to have your CMA, and you want to have it either on top CMA where you have the link. And make sure, guys, if you are going to have like your laptop, which is a good idea, and you're going to have all your material, have all the links open. So when you open your laptop, the seller guide's already there. The example, the brochure is already there. You don't want to be fumbling around at their house. Have it all ready that you just open, and then you can, you know, present, talk. You know what? Let me show you an example of what a lifestyle video is. Right. And I'll let them know when I'm also when I'm talking about commissions, I'll let them know that, you know, our team does have a higher percentage of finding the buyer for your property because of our marketing efforts. Right. And then I'll tell them a story about like how we, you know, I sold a listing over FaceTime. I tell that story all the time. And that's the difference of good marketing. Right. And let's be real. Most buyers, like over like 96%, whatever it is, start their search online before they even want to speak to a realtor. So how do you have your listing exposed to those buyers where you can, you know, get them and have your listing shown to the right people at the right times? Well, we have a marketer, and our marketer, you know, does all that magic. So you want to be able to talk about those things during your consultation, but you want to have everything up so you can show them you've prepared. So listing consultation confirmation, of course, we want to let them know. And you can schedule it now in your CRM. Gmail is great. I schedule so many emails, like put it for the next day at 8 a.m. because I don't want to be sending emails after a certain time, because then people get used to you working too late. But I'll have them go out at 8 a.m. is my favorite time, right? And it, you know, just confirming, looking forward to meeting you at 4 o'clock today, right? So you can do text message, you can do email, you can schedule it. Automation is everything. Just do something ahead of time to confirm that appointment versus just showing up. Next would be the listing consultation, and I don't think we're going there today, Bianca. Bianca?
Yeah, I mean, like, we can start it. We definitely have a little bit of time to start it.
Okay.
Or we can circle back as well. We can skip over this or call it a session and then start fresh next week, whatever is best for you, Corrie.
Yeah, whatever you guys want to do. Before I do anything, do you guys have any questions about, so we spoke about like qualifying sellers, asking the right questions, not being afraid to ask certain questions. All these questions are going to help you prepare to be the best professional you can in person. So don't be afraid to ask. Ask and you shall receive. People are afraid to ask. Just ask. Ask for the business. Ask for the appointment. Ask to help them.
Corrie, I'd love to pick your brain on, you know, getting the actual listing consultation. What value are you communicating, whether it's over a phone call, whether it's, you know, someone in your sphere, social media? How are you actually getting yourself into a listing appointment?
Sometimes it takes some like repetitive work, Bianca. Like sometimes it's not just happening, but I'm, you know, I know the thinking is selling. So I'll just continue to try to like, you know, I was thinking of you, I was by your house. Where are you at with like, I have somebody I'm trying to get in touch with right now that contacted me. And now, you know, they're getting the house ready and they've been in it for quite some time, and we're going to start painting. And I'm like, before you do anything, can I come over and see the house? No obligation. Just like, you know, there's no sense in painting the house a color that's not going to, you know, there's certain things that the advice that I can offer, they're going to help with the sale of the property, etc. So I'm trying to get in before they do that process, which has been quite challenging. But it's just coming in at different angles, right? One is they're on my list today to follow up with again, but just offering some kind of value where you let them know that it's not intrusive, right? How about, you know, how's your schedule looking this week or next week? I can come by for a quick consultation, do a walk through the house and give you some advice on things you consider to get the house ready for sale. Something to note is people typically have less to do than they think. So I always tell people before you're starting to do renovations or picking paint colors or making decisions on things, have a professional come through so you're not wasting time or money. With the market favoring sellers, there's less that you likely have to do than you think. I have some time later this week, something like that. So trying to offer some kind of value I'll reference like we spoke last week, you were going to check with your husband about us meeting this week. I wanted to check back at that. I'm meeting with some, I'm booking quite a few meetings in our area right now or around your area with people that are curious. You want them to kind of feel like they're missing out as well. Even though I'm not meeting with anybody around their house, you could kind of say that, right? To let them know that, okay, this is something I should be doing. And sometimes it takes like a few rounds, Bianca. Like, I don't want people to think like it's just like one call and it's like, yippee, let's book the show. Let's book it. No, it's not like that at all, to be honest with you. It's just, just repetitive and having a great conversation, following up. Not most people, I'll be honest with you guys, drop the ball and follow up. That's it right there. What's the magic? Follow up. Staying in touch, not losing. We had Sarah Kelke talk at one of our team meetings. I forget the wording she said, but it was great. Is like the magic is just not losing that connection. You've had a great connection, they're going to do something, but then we drop the ball because we get busy with a listing. We forget, right? This is why it's good to stay organized in your CRM to know like who your hot prospects are. But the biggest thing is we just drop off with our follow-up. And then we, all of a sudden, how many times, guys, have you driven by and then the house is listed? There's one in my area right now. I'm kicking myself. And I spoke to her last year, coming soon, with an agent that's not in the area, right? I'm like, I should have followed up with her. It happens to all of us. But so it's just repetition, Bianca, and just going in another round and also being aware of what's happening around that house. So maybe before you make your call, you've done a bit of research. Has anything sold on their street? Has there been anything that's sold that would be like a value to them to know? Or if I see something that's listed that's similar, and I'll like put a reminder to check. I want to let them know the sold price before they find it out. I thought of you today. This property just sold. I wanted you to know what happened. If it's holding back offers, I'll call the office the next morning after offers to find out how many offers so I can relay that information to my person that lives on the street or is right in the area of that house. So just staying on top of like, you really have to have your pulse on like I check the listings every single morning. What is currently listed? Like, what's the update? Like, you have to know those things. You have to know what your competition is. You have to know like what's on the market.
You can set up a search too, like just send it to yourself, not them, and just for their street or whatever makes sense. And it's a great reason to keep in touch with them if a new listing pops up or something sells. Like I'm one of those people that struggles to like make a call that's more creative than just like, hey, how's it going? So having any reason to get in touch with an item of value helps you, like you say, build that relationship and stay in touch.
Absolutely. We spoke a few months ago. You mentioned you may consider selling in the fall. As we are entering our fall market, I wanted to revisit that with you. You can still have those conversations right now, guys, with people. Right now is actually a great time. People are extremely interested in the real estate market. Our pricing has not failed, right? We've had a shortage of inventory for the past year because of the pandemic. I think, it's always been short, but extra short because of the pandemic. Things are more open than they were in the spring, right? Borders are open. You know what I mean? Like there's good reasons. Like we haven't been dealing with those foreign, like those international buyers. They've been waiting and they really have. So having those conversations with people to show them that now's the time to consider it. And if now's not the time, but now's the time to have the conversation for the spring, right? Or for whenever I still want to get in person with them regardless, because if they've lived in their house a really long time, they probably have decluttering to do, stuff that needs to go to donation, stuff that needs to be distributed to family. Like that is a lot of work. They need a plan for that, right? Which you can help with. I had a bin dropped in a client's driveway. I didn't pay for it, but I gave them the company and they did it, and it sat there for 14 days. And then the guy came and picked it up, and that was super helpful for them. So you tailor the needs depending on the client, but you need more information about the property to offer that schedule of how you can help. So I let people know we put together a work back schedule depending on what you need help with. Is it decluttering? Is it donating? Is it this, right? People are having a lot of stuff in their house right now because those donation places have been were closed for so long, right? So I think there's a lot of that, but we can help with that stuff. So it's just really, tailoring what they need to help them get to point A to point B. So sometimes it's slower, My last listings, I don't know what's going on in the last 4 months. They all want to list immediately, but that doesn't always happen, right? But don't be worried about, I've missed the fall market because I haven't been making my calls. Start today. People are very curious.
Can I ask you a question, Corrie?
Yep.
I'm curious how you're handling, do I buy first or sell first right now?
Which is a question that you're always asked, right? Because typically
Yeah.
we're dealing with a buy sell, right? So it depends on market conditions and it depends on location of the property, right? If it's in an area where I know it's going to sell like a hotcake, then I know selling's not going to be the issue, but we know buying has been challenging because of lack of inventory and multiple offers. And I'm probably going to have a more challenging time finding them a place. And I'm going to encourage them to get their house ready, but but not list it until we've made that purchase, and then we'll coincide the closings, right? But you do get some people that they do not feel comfortable making a purchase until they know what their home is sold for in terms of budget. You get that as well. So it really depends on, that's in your conversation, what you advise. If it's going to be that type of person, then what you would do is, as you guys are looking, you're getting the house ready, we can list the house for sale. You as a seller dictate your closing. Right now, you can get your price because of market conditions and sellers being favored right now in the market, and dictate your closing. Right? If you could get
exactly.
Right. And truly, you can, right? And then it's like, I encourage them that there is the potential that we could bump that up. If you found a place, do I know 100% I'll be able to bump it up? No, but these things just work themselves out. Right. And right now buyers agents are, they're going to do anything to have a deal come together, right? Depending on the area, but I'll let them know there's two options. You sell, you buy, you sell. Given, where your property is located and how the last sales have been going over the past, 3 months, 30 days, whatever it is, I am extremely confident that you're going to sell very quickly. This is once I've seen the house in person though.
Yeah, both of my next listings are for very particular, buying situations that they want. One is like basically on a certain street within 100 houses, and then another one is very particular as well. So we're looking to buy first, and it's the seller's market. So I feel confident with that, but just wanted to see where you were at.
No,
exactly, what you're seeing.
Exactly the same time, exactly the same thing, especially if they're very focused on like a specific like niche area and street. Also ask the question, do you have somewhere to go should you need to in the meantime? Most of our clients, like and I let them know we're doing this all the time. Most of my clients are buying and selling, so I'm coinciding closings all the time. You have nothing to worry about. You want them to feel confident. You don't want them to have any doubt that you have any doubt, even though inside you're like, I have doubt, right? You have to really ooze that confidence and know which is better. It depends on the market conditions, but also knowing, oh yeah, you know what, I could, we have an investment property we could stay at. So, there's an option should there need be. It's a good question to ask.
Yeah, because some people can carry two properties for a time as well, right? So it really depends what their situation is, asking them a couple of questions. I always like to, put forward my advice based on market. Like right now, it makes sense to buy first because that's the, it's the more challenging task. But, do you have a place to stay? Are you comfortable carrying, two mortgages for a time if things, if your place doesn't sell immediately? And like you say, Corrie, I think not introducing sort of fear of that outcome, or showing that you're not confident that you can get it done, but just kind of asking in a way that sort of figures out their situation before saying like, well, if it doesn't sell, what happens? I think that's key too. Laura, I was just thinking, you mentioned your client was looking for something very specific on a street. And obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is they should definitely buy first because it's going to be challenging to find them something. But I had a similar situation to that before, and they were actually, in talking to them about it, they were actually open to renting for a time. And
that's a good idea. I did that personally.
Yeah. So we actually sold it, and what I found was just by selling and them renting, it actually motivated them to actually expand their search a little more, to not just wait for that one house on that one street, because that looking for that specific thing sometimes can mean that they're never going to move, and that can not only negatively impact you and, your business, but, their position as well. If they need to make a move, but they need that fire lit under them, sometimes just sort of pushing them forward and, getting them to sell the place, and then sort of being more motivated to actually find what they're looking for and expand their, their criteria can be helpful.
Absolutely. And also letting them and making sure they're aware of like pricing and appreciation. The longer you don't buy and you sit in that rental, the more likely we know what's been happening in the market, guys, that appreciation.
Absolutely.
You kind of have to set that seed without being overly aggressive. Like, oh, I didn't think of that. Okay, you know what? Forget it. We're just going to, it opens up that, because it's true. And as a professional, we have to give them all options, but kind of lead them into the right one. Right? There's option A, there's option B, and this is what determines which is probably best for you. And given where your house is and now seeing in person, I feel very confidently that we can do this and then do this. So it's just.
And I always, sorry, Corrie, to cut you off. I was just saying that what I normally do, Laurel, is like, I ask them what their worst case scenario is. Is it that you've bought the house of your dreams, but suddenly now your house didn't sell in 7 days and you had to wait 14 days? Is that a more stressful situation? Or is it that you've sold your house and you have a boatload of money, but you can't find the house of your dreams? So allow them to kind of lead you to, like what type of buyer seller they are and where is going to be your worst case scenario.
That's
right?
great.
Like,
Worst case scenario is always a good question. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah. I had one of my guys, we were about to purchase and we kind of went over that. I'm like, okay, so the bank has said yes. And I'm like, so what's the worst case scenario? Is it that you bought this beautiful house, but maybe you don't get the price that you thought we were going to get on that house, or that we haven't sold the house right away? And the woman was like, oh my God, I never really thought of that. And you could just see the wheels spinning. And she was like, no, we absolutely have to sell first.
And then
I hadn't considered that.
Yeah.
And then, so we start on the sale, right? And then I have very motivated buyers, but we set up a 120-day closing date with the option to move it forward or back, because sellers get what sellers want, right?
Exactly. And I mean, I've never had a client stranded ever, like where we haven't been able to make something work. It all works itself out, right? But they have to feel confident in whichever route you end up going, that they've been given the options and it's tailored to what you think is best for them. Because what's been going on in the market. And if properties aren't selling in 7 days and all of a sudden that strategy has changed, and you want to make sure they're aware of that, right? What's happening right now is properties are selling at market value and it may take, up to 14 days. So you're setting the expectation versus just promising something that you hope is going to happen, but it hasn't been happening since May, right? So you got to be careful. You just make sure that you're educating them on what actual conditions are. They will, if you don't, come back to you and blame it on you. I hear it all the time. I'll get a referral from someone that's not happy with their realtor, but I still can't do anything because they're under contract. And it always comes down to expectations. They were promised something, didn't happen, right? And it's in terms of like the listing strategy or like the pricing, it's typically always the same thing. So if you can get that stuff cleared up at the beginning, and sometimes there's times where it's they're being adamant about listing 50,000 more than what you're saying, right? So you're going to have to do it, but you have told them why you really feel that the value should be here. So when you have that conversation in whatever amount of, if it doesn't sell, that you're not having a finger pointed at you, that you've already had the conversation of, initially when we spoke, my recommendation was to list here. We've tried it to see how the market responds for the last 2 to 3 weeks. We've now experienced that. So let's relist and get going on this. So just making sure that if you have to do something that's not what you're advising, that you have thoroughly let them know what your thoughts are on that. I think, Bianca, it's 11:20 and we're not going to get into the listing consult today.
No, it's all good.
I spend a lot of time there.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll kick off next week with the listing consultation. And if you guys have any other questions over the content that was discussed today, please feel free to reach out. I know Corrie would be happy to answer your questions.
Did you guys find it helpful?
Corrie, it was really helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Awesome.
so much.
Yeah.
If you guys ever need like advice on a listing or a question, just feel free to reach out to me.
Corey, I just want to say there's been like throughout my time at North Group and knowing you, you've always given me little tidbits about listing, and I've always like implemented them, and I've always noticed like positive results by it. And I do call you actually before most listings just to pick your brain a little bit, and it always helps kind of level set even for myself, because even as like a realtor, like, you know, you've been doing it for quite a while, you've been listing for quite a while, so I'm sure the jitters, even if they exist, they're minimal versus like myself or some of the people on the screen here, where we list and in the back of our minds we're still a bit like, man, this better like work out. Like this better do good. And I do call you, and it gives me a bit of a like changes my perspective. So just
That's awesome. I love that. Thank you. Yes, continue to reach out. I'm happy to help. I want to see everyone win and succeed. When I changed markets from condos to like including freeholds, that was really scary because condos were so easy to evaluate. I'm like, you know, by unit number and just you're looking at that building. And then when you get into freehold, it's like, whoa, that's a whole different ballgame. So I understand that challenge for any of you that are transitioning or trying to take more different listings. I'm here to help with that because it is different when you're doing like that kind of CMA. But yeah, just always knows that the door's open for support.
Well,
Thank
guys.
you.
um,
See you next
Bye,
week.
guys. Have a
Bye.
good day.
bye guys.